Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Routing Security RpkI SIG. It's a new SIG. Aftab Siddiqui is the acting chair, and Dr. Dima and Rupesh Shrestha are the acting co-chairs. So I'm up here. As per the SIG guidelines, I have to run the elections for this new SIG to elect the chair. So I have to just quickly go through, and then I'll pass the microphone to Aftab. Chair election, as I said, this is a new SIG, so we don't have any elected chairs for this SIG. As usual, we open the nominations, but because the SIG doesn't have a mailing list yet, we send the call for nominations to the APNIC Talk mailing list only. Nominations closed on 16th Feb on Sunday, and the term of the elected chair will be 2 years. The chair responsibilities are online in the SIG guidelines, but quickly to go through, mainly to chair the SIG session, prepare the agenda, call for papers, presentations, subscribe to the mailing list, and encourage discussions in the SIG session, and as well as report at the AGM or AMM. If it's at APRICOT, it's AGM. If it's standalone, it's AMM. Election procedures, again, candidates must be present in the room. Candidates have 2 minutes to speak to the participants if we're going to go have elections. Voting is by those present in the room, excluding APNIC staff, RIR board members, and APNIC board members. The election is decided by a count of show of hands. The count is taken by APNIC secretariat staff, and the candidate with the larger number of counts is elected. So we have 2 nominations, Mohammad Mashur Rahman and, of course, the acting chair, Aftab Siddiqui. Is Mohammad Mashur Rahman in the room? As I said, they must be present in the room. Or anyone know Mohammad Mashur Rahman is here at the conference, outside? No? In that case, since we don't have any elections, we will declare Aftab Siddiqui as the elected chair of the new SIG, which he will discuss with you, the name of the SIG and the charter. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for not voting. So anyway, but still, thanks a lot. So as Sunny explained, we have some unfinished business to complete first. We don't have any mailing list. That's quite strange for a SIG. But there's a good reason, because last time we couldn't figure it out what is the right name for the SIG. There are some arguments, both very strong enough, but now since I'm in the chair, I can do few things here and there. Anyway, let's start with that. So the first business, As per the SIG guidelines, at the first meeting of the new SIG, endorse the draft charter and elect chair and co-chairs at the first meeting of the new SIG. The attendees will be asked to endorse the proposed charter and formally elect the chair. So you have done the later bit part first. So let's do the early bit. As I said, when the SIG was formalized by APNIC EC in the APNIC 48, the following suggestions were made. Until the first meeting, where the name, the charter, and the chair should be selected, they formed it on this condition, right? So the first thing we have to do is select the name, and that name will be used for the mailing list as well, right? And that's why we don't have the mailing list. So yeah, it's a chicken and egg problem. Right, how simple is that? SIG name, but we need a community consensus. The reason behind the SIG name is, I can explain, you can defer, and we can have consensus. Routing security, the 2 options we had was either RpkI and routing security. In my opinion, routing security is much better because we can discuss in some manner, in some place, if we have to, I don't know why, BGP sec, as somebody said a moment ago. As I said, we don't have to ever, but still, it's standard RFC. But if we go with the RpkI, we will limit our options, and we can only discuss things which, of course, I mean, we can still open up through our charter, but the name will put it as in a small cube. That's why not just me, it's my suggestion along with the co-chairs. I'm not sure if the co-chairs are online at the moment. We have two co-chairs, Rupesh Shrestha and Dr. Dima. If Dr. Dima can say something, say hi, Dr. D. He's on the chat. He is saying hi on the chat. Thank you so much. He says hi. So, so that was our collective decision. But again, it has to be community decision. We can't just make that call on our own. So, if I may request people to share their opinion, if they have any concern with that. If they are okay with routing security as the SIG name, then okay, some comment.
Jahan Gir is on the chat, and he asks, why routing security RpkI / SIG Charter since policy SIG already have? Not sure about what that means. There's a second question. What is the difference between policy SIG and routing security RpkI * SIG?
Okay, so the policy SIG is about policy. Anything else is on routing security, which covers anything which touches routing. We will put it in the routing security SIG, but you don't have to create policy out of routing security SIG. You can, you may, but you don't have to. Right? The whole idea of the policy SIG is to discuss policy matters, and usually anything which touches the policy. There was few presentations in the policy SIG as well, which were of course targeting the policy, different aspects of the policy. So that was the whole idea. I mean, we tried to open up the charter of the policy SIG in the last meeting. That's good, but still we felt that it is not good enough to discuss such matters in the policy SIG. So that's why we created the routing security SIG. And we have somebody else coming slowly towards the mic.
Warren Kumari, Google. So this is probably the worst idea ever. But you said anything about policy gets spoken about in the policy SIG. Then you said anything about routing gets spoken about in the routing security SIG. You actually said anything about routing. Should it maybe just be the routing SIG?
It's not the worst idea, but yeah. You just need a trigger point at some point, right?
You do, absolutely. So I was thinking about, the routing all destinations SIG, because that has, an abstractness that doesn't touch everything, but, routing all known destinations is RAND if you spell it incorrectly. That's a little too IETF-y for here, maybe?
Yes, versus must, should, could, would, yes, something like that. So Taiji-san.
Oh, sorry. It's SIG, right? So special interest group, right?
Yeah.
So we don't need to cover all things, or we need to choose the correct word to the clear, it's like a dictionary. We don't need to cover all of them. So if we have an interest on the routing security, we can make the routing security SIG, right? That's
yes.
my personal opinion.
Okay, so the interest of the audience is towards the routing security, not specifically in the routing. So you can discuss OSPF security in the routing security SIG as well, other than the BGP security. So, so we will not be discussing the journal OSPF issues or the ISIS issues, I would say, right? So that's a good point, Taiji-san. So, routing security versus routing versus RpkI. If Sunny wanted to say something.
Sunny from APNIC.
Yep, it's on.
We used to have a routing SIG and we dissolved it, but the mailing list archive is still open. So I need to check with my technical colleagues whether we can use that name routing SIG or not, because we have to create a mailing list on that name, same as our SIG name.
Yes.
So just wanted to let you know.
So routing security SIG then. don't turn on the archives.
After Dima in the chat says, well, he suggests you show the proposed charter, but I guess that's coming next.
Yes, so right after, once we decide on the routing, on the name of the SIG, we can move on to the charter as one by one. So if I can have consensus on the name, please, people who support the routing security SIG. Yes, hands, please, sorry, yes, sorry. I'm a new chair.
So you say RSS.
Yeah, it's closed mostly, but yes. We'll provide the feed, it's okay. Yes, RSS. Anyone who's supporting RpkI SIG? No, okay. Or anyone supporting routing SIG? Yes, okay, go on. Thank you so much. Now we call it routing security SIG, so there is no static attached to it anymore. So thank you for that. We can call it routing security at, okay, sorry, Ziam.
Yeah, I'm Ziam from Vincis. Sani said there's a routing, already mail list is there. So if anybody can suggest from that mailing list to convert that name to the routing and security.
No, that's already been archived. So archives are available if somebody wants, but that is archived long time ago. So probably 6-7 years ago, more than that, I guess. Yeah, 6, more than that. So, I mean, that, I'm pretty sure audience is not interested in those discussion anymore. So we can move on and have something new and start from scratch. Charter, it's a long one, but just have a look. Provide the platform to discuss the operational issues and the best practices to secure global internet routing. The SIG will be the forum for discussion about broader internet routing topics, including RpkI, IRRD, etc., which are very much related to network operators. The SIG will act as a forum to develop and clarify deployment of services by APNIC such as RpkI, IRRD, RRDP, etc., and collect feedback from network operators about what changes they want and how it is positively or negatively impacting their operations. The SIG will focus on information sharing, outreach, capacity building, and other activities that will advance APNIC's vision for a global, open, stable, and secure internet. So, and the last part is if there is any need to support the community for a policy development from the routing security side, we can help. But that is not the platform. This is not the platform. We will provide the help. We can help APNIC EC or the community to just provide the feedback. So this is a closed charter. If you have any comment on this one, happy to discuss. So again, we had some rounds between the co-chairs, and we think this is the good one, but I think Taiji doesn't agree with this.
Okay, thank you, Taiji. After by in the morning, like we saw in the policy SIG regarding the AS0 policy, we saw very few comment because it's totally technical.
Yes.
Right. How we can accommodate those kind of thing in this SIG?
So again, it has to be presented at the policy SIG, because that is the only platform we have for policy related issues. But the discussion can happen here and can be collectively provided to the policies and help the authors to formulate a better policy, right? And once it has been formulated and on the basis of community consensus, we can just bring it to the policy SIG and be discussed there.
Or probably we can do way around, like we can talk here and then send it to them.
Exactly, this is what I'm saying. Discuss it here,
Right.
formulate it in a better manner, right? Discuss. So in the policy SIG, we had this issue from the very beginning, that please do not propose policy directly. Come up with the problem and a solution in front of the community, and let's talk about it first, right?
Yeah.
And what was happening in the past, and I'm to blame myself for that we came up with the policy and saying, this is the problem, this is the solution, and let's discuss. So at least this is the platform where, if we had the platform, I wouldn't have proposed the AS0 policy without any discussion, right? So I would have brought it here, discuss it with the community, and then present a policy. I mean, we had to go through multiple rounds, made few adjustments to the policy just because of the feedback.
Right.
So that's my point.
Yeah, thank you.
Taiji-san.
Taiji from JPNIC. I just think about the outcomes or the direction for this SIG. We already have the routing SIG in 7 or 6 years before. Then we shouldn't do the same shrinking again, I think. But we already have hot agenda for the SIG, I think.
Yes.
So I would think some directions like deployment or better routing security.
Yes, so we do have some directions right at the end of this session that what we're going to do moving forward, kindly suggested by Dr. Dima and Rupesh. So we will put those directions in front, and we have a panel discussion which is part of the next step towards this routing security SIG. So that is, again, yes, I agree. And another point which you mentioned as well is we have a hot topic of routing security at the moment. If I'm counting it right, other than the deployathon, we had 4 sessions on covering the routing security, right? Whether it is BGP routing security or BGP or something, and even in the IXP peering sessions, 2 presentations were discussing the AS0 ROA, which is, of course, discussing the routing security. So it's a hot topic. If the hotness of that topic dies out, we can close it again. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing is the outcome. If we have some outcomes we are thinking of may help to
Yes.
our activities. It could be a report, annual report, or incident reports, or something we discussed about.
We do have certain proposed outcomes, which we're going to discuss it later in the session. We do have certain matrix for ourselves because we don't want to be an endless SIG, right? If we are not able to produce the result we are expecting, then we have to rethink about this, right? Whether we're doing it right or wrong. So yes, you're right, but we do have some matrix for us, and the matrix are targeting at least 1 year. So by the time we are in next APRICOT, wherever that would be, we will be able to share more.
Okay.
Yes. So, Suman Bhai then.
Hi, this is Shuman from Fiber Home. I'll be just pointing out to the SIG Charter. The SIG will be the forum for discussion about broader internet routing topics. So if you say broader internet routing topics, then actually you're basically crossing the boundary of security and bringing everything about routing, not about security.
Okay,
security.
so it should be discussion about broader internet routing
routing
security topics.
Yes, that makes sense.
I got your
to
point.
me,
That's. I
actually.
think it's a mistake. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Bertrand Gerrier. I would like to clear something on the last part.
The bottom part. Okay.
Yeah. Review technical elements of policy proposal concerning routing security. Full stop. Not to advise the APNIC EC, because it seems that you want to squeeze the policy SIG in the process and go directly to the EC.
Okay, that was not the intention, but I get your point. Okay. Because we cannot.
No, you cannot.
Yes. That's not possible through, yeah, I mean, I get your point. Okay, so we have two amendments. One is the internet security, internet routing security topic on line number 1 to 3, and the last one concerning routing security. Proposal concerning the routing security. And full stop. That's where you put the full stop, right? Yep. Yes, Maimura-san.
Akinori Maimura from APNIC. I am now saying a little bit contrary to what Bertrand said. My point is that, yes, the routing security is a very hot topic these days. And then I can imagine APOP sessions may have such sessions about the routing security. And then I have no idea what distinguished between the APOP session and the routing security SIG. So in that term, it is for me meaningful to have the phrase to advise the APNIC Executive Council. Then this SIG's purpose is really clear. It's totally different from the APOP session in terms of the routing security, but this SIG is to advise APNIC, not necessarily to be Executive Council, but
to the APNIC community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then yes, this SIG could be advisory body for the routing security issue.
So the differentiating point from the APOPs is APOPs happens during the APRICOT, right?
Okay.
And not at the standalone APNIC meetings.
Yeah.
Right. We do have technical session at the APNIC meetings, but not nothing like APOPs. Right. APOPs are very technical, and even this time we didn't put anything which could have a conflicting topic in the APOPs, and that was the whole idea. And even moving forward, as agreed with the co-chairs, we will put our agenda in front of the PC, APRICOT PC, rather than conflicting or competing for the content. But on the policy side, yes.
Yeah. It's purely information sharing between the community members.
Yes.
That's excellent. Then this SIG would be some advisory body. That's my point. Bertrand, can you agree on my point? Not the EC, but the community.
APNIC community.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not for the policy.
For the community.
Technical advisory.
Does that?
Technical advisory, yes, not for the policy. Yeah. That point taken. Yes. Thank you. That's my point. Thank you.
Okay. So if I may repeat, Bertrand, if I may repeat, you're saying organization to review technical elements of the policy proposal concerning routing security to advise the APNIC community. Does that answer your question? Yep. Okay.
Relaying Dima, who would like to respond to Taiji-san. He says the SIG may consider giving deliverable output by publishing serial reports at time, such as RSAC report at ICANN community.
So, I mean, okay, I'll show you the matrix we have. He was giving one of the suggestions, but I can share because Dr. Dima is part of the RSAC as well. So, so if I can propose, we have Warren.
Warren from APNIC. In regards to line 3, we're already changing it to internet routing security topics. But then at the end of the line, you've got ETC. In English, that is very ambiguous.
Sorry, come again?
At the end of line 3, you've got the words ETC, which means etc. So that means anything.
Anything related to routing security?
No, it just goes ETC. It then overrides what you've said in internet routing topics. So in English, that,
so
to me, that would mean anything.
Etc. would be removed. I mean,
etc. needs to be defined better.
Okay, if we go with the literal English sense, yes, you are right, but it's okay.
That's what the law does, though.
Just to clear a point, etc. doesn't mean anything. It means following. So if you're talking about routing security topics, you start stating RpkI, IRD, and the rest of the routing security topics, not anything else, because
Okay,
we're not
so
talking about cooking.
English is not my native language, so if we have a native English speaker, I would request somebody to... Okay. It can't get any bizarre than this, so yeah.
I am wrong.
So Warren Kumari Googling, I mean, I think that the sort of intent is clear. This is a charter. It's
Yes.
not a strict contract where, we're forced to. So.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Thank you for English native speaker. That sounds, it solves the problem. I hope it does, right? So the two edits we have is broader internet routing security topics, which is line number 3, and the last one is replace EC with the community. If we all agree on that, can we just have a raise of hands for the consensus, and we will edit this and publish it? If you all agree with the 2 edits, please raise your hand. Okay, so what happened with others? They don't agree? So people who do not agree with these 2 edits and this charter, please raise your hand. In a Roberts rule, we have to do abstention as well. It's not necessary here, but I think we have a consensus. Thank you so much for that. So that brings to the end of this, and to a next topic. You have to hear me for the whole session because unfortunately my 2 co-chairs are not here in person. So yes, please forgive me for that. So for 90 minutes, it will be me only. Oh, because he's on the panel. Okay. Otherwise, the other 3 panels have to speak more. Meanwhile, we are testing it. If I may request, are you still testing? Yes. If I may request Dr. Philip Smith, Martin Levy, and Taiji-san to the stage, please. We are skipping one thing, I know. It's okay. No, good. No. You don't need. All right, so we have our distinguished guest here, right? Yeah. So meanwhile, Sunny is trying to, okay. I think usually Zoom works. Anyway, so the whole idea is to discuss the most important part. And the part of the important part of that topic is what's next. So we had, to give you a background, we had RpkI Deployathon. It was a whole day event, very well attended, a lot of learning for us as well. So it was myself, Dr. Philip led the whole Deployathon. Tashi was there. Okay, I can hear myself. That's working. And we had Taiji-san as well for the support. And an APNIC training team made a wonderful job. But we learned a lot of things. We did it in APNIC 48. We repeated it. We fixed few things, but we broke few others. Right? So if we are doing, I mean, and all of us have implemented ROA and ROV in whatever network we are running. It's a small one for me, it's a /24, it's okay. But yes, we do things in our network. And if it was so broken for us, just imagine if you're network operators, how difficult it is for you, and there is a fear of implementing something like that, right? And that's what we feel there is a problem, that why it is not getting a lot of traction. It is getting it, it's not there yet. So that's my question for the panel. I will start with Dr. Philip and asking a very simple question. What should be our learning lesson from the deployathon first?
You want just one lesson?
Lessons. What should be our learning lessons from anything which is not very controversial and put me in trouble like last year?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Just because I shared the tweet.
It was my report, yes. It was my report, but AFTAB had the good fortune or the misfortune of sharing it. And I mean, the intention in September wasn't to name and shame. It was really just to try and point out things that could be improved. So, I mean, lessons that we had. I mean, obviously, the whole MSA issue has been dealt with IETF, and we had a bit of discussion about the rights and the wrongs there. We spent a lot less time on the ROA signing this time around compared with last time. But this, certainly, the MSA issue needs to be dealt with. Several of us had fairly strong views about it, but it needs to be sorted. On the validator side, we saw general improvements. I mean, Routinator is still the obvious only one that works without really blinking for anybody to get set up and installed. Whereas the others, again, we found, they all work, don't get me wrong, but the documentation needed to get them set up is still needing work. RpkI put a lot of effort into doing documentation to improve their one, and there's a lot of good feedback for that. And the other two, we reported in wherever we reported. I've forgotten now. Where did we report? In the deployathon on Tuesday morning plenary, and so that's on the website. But what's there? But that's fairly clear what has to be done from the validator point of view. But unlike last time around, we got all validators working. That's a big change, and that's a much, much bigger improvement. Members of the deployathon were using all 4 of them. So that's a very good sign. So I think for the general internet population, having that selection of validators is a good thing. So that was the second one. For routers talking to validators, no issues whatsoever. Remember, we didn't give any participants any guidelines on what to do. We just said, you need to have validator talking to router. Go look up whatever your favorite search engine is and get it done. So getting the routers talking to validators, easy. And as for router vendor behavior, we documented the Cisco iOS XE misbehavior September last year. And we noticed it again this year. The good thing is that Mark Tinker is one of the participants. Cisco have reached out to him recently about making efforts to fix the very broken iOS behavior. So we're hoping that that can happen. We're hoping it can actually be fixed on releases that are out there already, and that you don't have to go buy the latest, greatest, must phone home to Cisco iOS that the new licensing scheme that they have is doing. iOS XR has no issue. We weren't able to make it work in the virtual environment, which is a shame, but it's not Cisco's fault. It's just the nature of what we were trying to do, which again, one of the lessons, try not to be too ambitious. The Juniper kit just worked. It was there, it was all fine. We had to upgrade software because of a broken feature about the opaque extended community that Juniper fixed around about October last year, but the brand new routers that ARNet kindly loaned us had very old software in them. So that's a conversation ARNet can have with Juniper about how they got old equipment. But the Juniper kit, no issue, behaved exactly as it says on the tin, so that was all fine. We also got Nokia routers. They behaved exactly as they said on the tin as well. There was no issue on that side. So the other lesson out of that is really I think we were over-ambitious in what we're trying to do with environment. People really enjoyed having real equipment because virtually you're never really quite sure. So we need to think a little bit about how we do that. And the other one is that we were too ambitious with our agenda because what we wanted to do was look at interoperability between the different vendors and some of those features and issues. There was quite a big discussion during the Deployathon plenary about whether we needed this opaque community support or not. Some people felt they really needed it. Others were like, why are we doing this? Because generally, one point of view practice is that we drop on the BGP peer and we don't need the rest of the network to see. So, it's a discussion point. So what would be nice the next time around, and I hope APNIC will look at doing this in Dhaka for APNIC 50, is we can explore those issues some more. We hope that all the validated documentation will be sorted out by then, and we can actually spend a bit more time looking at how these bits of equipment operate. Not every network operates using just one vendor. Some are multi-vendor, and running multi-vendor, you can catch yourself out really badly. So I think those were the bulk of the learning lessons that we had from that session.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I want to ask a slightly different question to Martin. And the question is, we have been talking about creating ROAs, right? For a very long time. It's getting better, as I said before. But what should we do which can trigger the community to create ROA and the right ones, right? Because what APNIC did in the past, and they did it with the right intention, they said, look, create a ROA and here's the t-shirt, right? And t-shirt was nice, so they created a ROA. But it ended up in a lot of invalid ROAs now. Because they did it because APNIC was asking for create it, but they never updated anything.
I think we've got a very long history in this community of trying to motivate people.
With the t-shirt?
With a t-shirt to use new technologies. In a past life, I did it with V6.
Yes, I have an IPv6 SAGE t-shirt.
Yes, the SAGE t-shirt, which I think now is 11 years old. I did the math right. And it clearly had an effect. I mean, when I left the company 6 years ago, there was, I think, 5,000 shirts that had been delivered around the world. So let's not say that T-shirts is the wrong way. We know our audience. Our audience is a T-shirt friendly geek environment, yes. However, I can actually go back to something that Philip talked about, and I can sort of talk about this incentivization in some useful way. And I'll try and be a little abstract about it. But it really boils down to a simple phrase: name and shame. And however you look at it, in a global internet with a global routing table and a need for global connectivity, each and every player, in some form of hierarchy, large networks down to smaller networks, whatever your definition of large is, content or routes or geography, we all have to play together and do the right thing. And things like the routing table for this community is something where we are blessed, if I can use that word, it's a little excessive, but with an amazingly good history being kept by various organizations that we trust in, RIPE, Oregon, CADA, other places, where if I need to go back and look at a routing table from 15 months ago at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, it's there. Yes. And I can look and see the data and in fact actually say, oh look, that is an invalid route or equivalent. So as we look at the shared environment, I think it actually may be something that we could look at developing tools. You work for the Internet Society. Manners has a, is it public now?
Some part of it, yes.
Some part of the observatory is public. And if you do the right thing there, you really can see the good stuff and the bad stuff. And therefore, there is a way of doing something. I've forgotten the gentleman's name at the back from New Zealand who talked in the previous session. But you made the comment, no, sorry, it was the gentleman from Australia, made the comment about picking up the phone or equivalent and phoning somebody and saying that you've got an invalid route.
Warwick did the
Warwick,
phone, yes.
Yes, sorry. And literally phoning some network halfway around the world and saying, you have an invalid rower, and now that we're dropping invalids, you cannot get to our network. Well, I want to talk about that point because the shared routing table means he phoned and fixed something that was useful to me and to you and to everybody else in the room and everybody else on the internet. Because in the RpkI world and in this routing table world, essentially, we're nearly all seeing the same routes. So that route was invalid for everybody running a drop invalid environment, an RpkI enabled environment. So where do we go next? I've given a long diatribe, but the reality is that because this is a very shared environment, we need tools and we need mechanisms to communicate somehow to very quickly deal with, in operational timelines, the ability to fix errors that we see, that we can confirm are errors. It's actually the hardest part of, I think, of what I just said, in such a way that we can improve the quality of the network. Now that is the what can we do next for people doing RpkI.
It deals with the invalids,
It deals with the invalids, or it deals with you have a particular person at a company, they set up RpkI, they leave, no one else knows anything about it, and it stays and stagnates. And we see that in different strata of the world in many different cases.
Yes.
So that's enough for now, but that's a good next step, and it needs somebody or many somebodies to do that monitoring and not just leaving it on a web page that somebody may not look at, but actively going out. Tweet an invalid, feel free. Let's have a Twitter bot for that. I think there is one, actually. But there's one for bad routing. I don't know if there's one for bad RpkIs. Anyway, sorry, that would be a next sort of step from somebody or somebodies.
So just to summarize what you're saying, it's hard to do that, by the way. But anyway, let me try. Just to summarize, you're saying focus on the invalids first before asking more people to create rows. To clean the space first before you add more people in the same manner we added in the past, because that would add more invalids, if I'm getting it right? Okay, that's fine. So if I come to Taiji-san for similar question, but from a perspective of a national RIR, right? So you are looking after the RpkI initiative in JPNIC. What can trigger the JP community to start creating ROAs and get rid of the invalids? I mean, last time I checked, there were not many from JPNIC side.
As NIR RpkI CA, I think you may understand we are in the middle, right? So you may think about the middle has upper treatment and lower treatment. Additionally, we have several difference of communities, geological difference, language difference, and regional difference, like between RIPE region and AP region. So I And my team developed the tool to alert the difference between ROA and BGP route. The ROAMON is the name of the tool, but the next step will be harder than creating tool itself, because we need to find a way to contact to the people who are in the far place. It's not only the physiological distance, but also network or NUG difference. My first trial is Slack, not using the email address register already, because they may have many spams. But from now, we need to find a way to contact between NOG or between the different countries, I think. Is it?
So you think it's going to help the community, local community, to be more engaged and create ROAs?
Not only creating ROAs, the cleanness is...
Okay, not creating just ROAs, creating the clean ROAs.
Yes.
not doing what happened in the past and just... I mean, that's what that was one of the discussion that which Tashi presented, that don't just create the ROA because we are asking you to do it. Let's just understand why you are doing it, right? If you understand the why, it will be easy for you to fix it. Otherwise, just for the T-shirt. I mean, we'll happy give you T-shirt, but still, just understand why we are doing it. What you're advertising, then create a ROA. Yeah.
Right. The user treatment is right.
Yep.
And it includes the communication channel.
Okay, good. Okay, I just want to share one thing, and it's an open question to all three of you. 2017, Tom is not here yet, I think. So 2017, I presented in OSNOG the RpkI status of Australia. And people literally laughed at it and say, no, it's not going to work. Look at us now, 2020, 3 years later, right? It's a reality. So do you think there was a mistrust at that time, or people were just, nah, or just an Australian way of doing things? So I wouldn't ask the last part of Australian way of doing things to all of you, but the first part, was there any mistrust in the RpkI itself? There was a mistrust that, oh, why we are putting our private keys in APNIC? You don't have to now. You can do it yourself, but was there anything like that? Or it was just a misunderstanding and people say, no, there is no reason to do it. What do you think?
I mean, in some of my early experiences of trying to get this deployed, I would be seeing things, mistrust of vendor code. I mean, I'm aware of a few breakages that happened because people just turned stuff on because, APNIC was certainly pushing it. And, I was pushing it as well as trying to do the right thing of securing the routing system. And, we ended up breaking some stuff through misfeatures. And it was also, I think the early years of trying to get things signed, it wasn't really an entirely obvious process. The 5 registries have come a long way in improving things, some more than others, but making the process easier. And you've probably heard elsewhere, APNIC is trying to improve the user interface here, which is all good. That's a positive thing we see. But if I look back, 2015, 2016, it was very early things. And the validator we were all using then was the one by Dragon Labs, which was great at the time. No longer maintained, which is really sad. And I wish somebody would step up to help them get that back. But it was that type of thing, and early it was. If we do the deployathon here and it has this feeling, oh my gosh, this is still very beta type code. Think back 5 years, how it all was then. Those people who were trying it were, so I don't, so it wasn't really a mistrust. It was just, it wasn't even, the ingredients weren't even mixed. It wasn't anywhere near the oven.
Okay. So it wasn't the right time.
Yeah.
So you think the time is right now, and it's
I think,
it's much better to explore right now rather than.
Right now, I don't really see any show-stopping issues for getting ROAs signed. For dropping invalids, I mean, every time I speak to people, I hear different operators are starting to drop invalids. You know, some from the customers, some from peers, you know, depending which operator it is. And so that's good progress. You know, I think that we now have tier ones, well, Telia has been mentioned before, dropping for customers and for peers.
Yep.
That is good enough for a tier one with a very good process in place. I think a lot of other people can have confidence to do the same thing. So it's certainly better now than it was 5 years ago, that's for sure.
Okay.
My story is a kind of broader aspect. For human or organization, it's difficult to remember the things happen in several years. So the difficulty or the mistrust is happen from the property of human, I think. And human has history. As a registry, we have history. Some prefixes has no information about the routing, but they are allocated correctly. And the people who are related to the prefix allocation cannot see the actual BGP route because they are not the technical person or in other section from the routing section. So one by one, we can trust each other. And maybe one by one, between organizations, we can trust. But the summarized system like RpkI could be having a mistrust, but it should be also a history. So if we make the changes for the history by using tools or the raising awareness of ourselves, we can change.
Okay,
that's interesting story.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds a good idea.
We're dealing with a protocol that's over a decade old. We're dealing with a problem that's definitely older than
3 decades old.
Yeah. We're dealing with this motivation issue with a new protocol. And we're dealing with people who, and I could as well, argue that, oh no, there are errors in the way. This is not a complete protocol. It's got bugs, it's got inconsistency, or it's got things that it doesn't really do, or it's got too much stuff in it. There's lots of things like that. Actually, interesting, I could have said the exact same set of sentences about IPv6. But in the RpkI world, it is what we've got. It will do route origin validation. There are definitely some things that it can't handle. And it doesn't do path validation, but there is no better way of doing path validation, immaterial of the fact that there is an RFC and there is a protocol. I choose to ignore it. It's too complicated and more. So we've been here before. That's sort of the point about making the quip about V6. And we've still moved forward with V6 and we'll move forward with RpkI. Even if all we ever have in the tree, the only assertion that we have is a rower to do origin validation. There are definitely people, Asimov's draft with ASPA or cones, and hopefully they do become one draft, quite frankly. That's another whole other conversation. That definitely takes it to the next level, but there's going to be a lot of work that's needed at the people that, at the moment, hold all the data. So if I can sort of say, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, it isn't perfect, but this is definitely something we need to be motivated about and move forward. And in parallel, we'll go work with sort of what to do next and how to take things like ASPA or AS cones as drafts and actually convert them into the real world and then implement them, which actually is quite hard.
Yes.
Cryptographically signed data has been sort of where you know who you're talking to, and you can go through many more steps to prove that, has been proven in the web world to be the only way to have faith that I can log into my bank on this random, well, it's my device, but I log into on this device on this random Wi-Fi, and the bank is comfortable that it's me, and I am comfortable it's the bank.
Even though there are more CAs in that part of the cryptography X compared to RpkI.
And you fell into my trap, because if you look at what's gone on in the CA world with pinning, with client certificates, and more importantly, with the ability to monitor back from clients on exactly that issue. The CAB has actually done a lot more work than we've done in the routing world. Different motivation, probably a lot more money at stake. Although it's nice to remind them every now and again that they're still highly dependent on BGP and DNSSEC and stuff like that they should realize that. So I think that we should go out and look at what else is being done in parallel and then realize what we have to implement, what we have to write next, and get on with it. But the point is that the basics of my device talking to my bank, the basics of that TLS connection is sort of where we are with the ROAs today. So we have to continue what we're doing, and then we've got to work on how to build, the what's next on top of it.
Okay, so last question I would like to ask is, are we back on to the same bandwagon, I wouldn't call it bandwagon, the same chicken and egg situation like we had in IPv6, that when content providers will start pushing for it, the operators will deliver it. So it's the same thing. If the big operators will start dropping invalids, the other will fix it, or they will create the proper ROAs, or something like that. Are we going into the same direction? I don't think it worked for IPv6, that only because Google or Facebook has IPv6, everybody will just use IPv6. So does it even help?
No, it's a different strata of, there's something slightly different. So that's where the analogy completely breaks down, right? Because people were able to put their head in the sand and live in a pure v4 world and say, look, I still work. And sadly, that is the case. However, in the RpkI world, when you look at not just Telia, but AT&T, Cogent's doing their first set of drop invalids on at least their peers, which is important. We're seeing all of the other tier ones, independent of what you think that list is.
A lot of IXs are doing it.
And then way more IXs, which is actually protecting a lot of the smaller networks out there. That in fact, actually, it does affect everybody on the internet. It's not something you can ignore. And momentum, even at 120-something thousand ROAs that we're sitting at the moment, which is way better than if we were sitting here a year ago.
So you're not even counting the Arentel.
I may have run that test recently without the, it's the number is much larger than it was a year ago. That's the real stat I want. And on top of that, it does affect everybody on the internet. And if we get to the point of all tier ones dropping invalids, we will be at a significant point where even if we only have a couple of 100,000 ROAs, let's say in 6 months or 9 months' time, because the tier ones are being highly pressured because of realizing they don't want to be the last one. Somebody will write a blog about that and call them on it. Guaranteed.
Noted.
So we're getting there. And I think that is the momentum that will get this sort of past, to the point where it affects everybody. So I think that's where the analogy of our experiences with V6 completely break down.
Okay.
For the better.
For the better. Okay, thank God. Philip, you've been consulting and helping networks to deploy technologies, right? Whether it is IPv6 or BGP in the right manner. I wouldn't call BCP38 at all, but yes. Why it is easy for big operators like Telia or even CCOM or others we have heard, and the IXs to deploy it, and the small operators saying, no, it doesn't affect me at all. They can do not only route origination, certifying their resources, and they are stepping ahead and doing route validation. They have big networks, they have big problems, and the small operators are saying, no, it doesn't affect me. And you have seen it, we have seen it together.
Yep, we've certainly seen that, and I don't really know how to answer it, because I can't really say, well, it depends on the network folks who work at the different operators, because some of the more smaller operators have got really good network folks who are always interested in looking at the new technologies and new things and follow best practices. I don't really want to say either that, if they go to the NOGs, then they know what's going on, whereas if they just hide in their home network and don't pay attention to the world, they don't know what's going on, because some actually do. It's just hard to give a sweeping answer. Generally, the thing is, people won't do things until it really affects them. So it's back to what Martin was saying. They won't do things until it affects them, or until they understand that if they do this thing, it will actually be good for their infrastructure. So it makes it very, very variable. Some of the places I've gone to, early deployments, they pulled back. But now, the whole community is looking at this because they're making that particular effort, and it's almost independent of us coming along. But then some other places, that was one of the things we're going to look at the deployathon. I've got a default route from upstream provider, so there's nothing I can do. And we need to address that default route plus some prefixes issue as well, because a lot of the people say, my upstream needs to do it first before it makes any sense for me to do it. And I'm saying, well, no, you can still check for the invalids on the prefixes you do get. Don't wait for your upstream provider. And that's why I was quite happy to see the tier ones, the big regionals all doing it. I was just chatting with PCCW earlier, and they're saying, yeah, we're doing it for our peers. I was like, good, great news. What about your customers? That's coming next. So, as Martin said, the big guys are doing it, so there's less excuse for the smaller ones to say, I'm waiting for the big one, because you can now say, well, the big ones are doing this, and you need to do every little bit to help protect your network, your customers, and what they're up to.
So what's your excuse now? Would be the next thing.
It's what the excuse now. And some of them, some of the small ISPs are using vendors who have stated they're not going to do this. I'm not going to name any vendors, but there's a particular one that came up in
the TICs.
Yes. And so now they're kind of like, that's a vendor. The vendor should have been there 5 years ago. This is all thing about RFC compliance for the important stuff. Arista here and the conference network were running engineering, what was it called? Early field trial code. Sorry, correcting that. Early field trial code. But what has Arista been doing for the last 3 or 4 years? Why is it EFT now? So, it's good that it is. But so some of the small providers are stuck with equipment or implementations that simply cannot support it. Why are they making those purchasing decisions? Because it comes down to, it's cheap. So, we've got all these things that are affecting what people are doing.
Okay, so. That's great. So if anybody has any last comment, then we can wrap it up quickly. Anything, Taiji?
I do kickboxing for my exercise, actually. And the people is afraid after being hit. So it's a kind of property of the human or organizations. If you have hit, we often protect. Next time we don't want to have the same thing. So looking at the risks is a kind of important things to use the security tool to protect human organization. So our hands-on course is very high technical things, but I'm looking at the user or human aspect. They want to protect by themselves, even it's registered by themselves.
Okay, right. Yes, last minute.
Are we out of time?
Yep. Want to say something?
May I have 2 minutes?
Yes.
Perhaps 30 seconds even?
I'm gonna relieve my, what's it called? Release my time? Yes.
Okay.
So I would like to congratulate the chair on taking the position, but also the community on deciding to reawaken this SIG activity, because I think that's very important. We've lacked a sense of engagement and drive in our region from the routing active community, and it's really lovely to have this come back into being. So APNIC has, if you like, a statutory obligation. We are an agent that has to perform a role aligned with the RFC, and we have to perform roles aligned with policy intent. And that's kind of in a slightly different box. But we also undertake product development. And if I could have your permission, I would like to feel I could bring APNIC product that relates to routing security into this room and do a very useful thing, which is validation in this community. If we could check in with you and say, is this okay? Is what we're thinking okay? So the activity we did in Policy SIG, where I talked about the nature of our design for AS0, would you be comfortable if I brought these kinds of questions into
And
this
we
room?
discussed it with the Policy SIG chairs and co-chairs, and we believe that the right platform would be for such topics would be routing security SIG, but of course any aspect of it should
that relates
also
to
be
policy that would go
discussed
back.
it to
And
the policy SIG.
additionally, several people here have been helping us with UX in one-on-one sessions, and I would like to thank you all for helping us overcome some significant issues in how we have been thinking about the abstraction of routing and the provision of routing security. You are giving us a lot of information, and again, we would hope to bring that into this group. So
Absolutely,
thank you.
absolutely. Thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for our panelists for providing the feedback. Philip had to go arrange the social, so he had run away anyway. So thank you, Philip. Thank you. Just because of the time, I have one quick thing for all of you. Just to share one thing is the I presented in last meeting I presented the AS0 policy in APNIC. People in the other regions found that policy interesting, and they proposed it as well. So now we have this policy in 4 RIRs. So Jordi, just want to share that what's happening in other RIRs. So a quick 5-minute update on that.
After, sorry, there was a comment earlier that I didn't get to read from the Zoom chat, and it's from Jahangir Hossain for the APNIC Secretariat about the Charter. So I'm sorry it's a bit late for that, but
we already have our consensus. So yeah, it's
Can I just read the comment and then
it,
you decide what to do with it? He says that the proposed chartered SIG information need to send with necessary information to APNIC members for comments, since APNIC members are key community in APNIC.
Well, it has to be decided on the forum, and we did, but we will present it to the community, and Charter is not set on stone. It can be updated for sure. Yes.
So, I prepared those slides on the spot. I had so many presentations today, so I am not sure I have made any big mistake. I hope not. I have not consulted these with co-authors of the same policy proposal in other regions, so this is only my view. I think it's correct, but just in case, disclaimer, okay? So basically, we have the same policy proposal that was submitted in RIPE. You have here the title of the proposal, the number of the proposal, and the link, if you want to read that. It was sent version one on the 22nd of October. The status is the initial discussion phase concluded. In RIPE, when this initial discussion phase concludes, it goes for a new version, if necessary, to make changes according to the inputs received from the community. And then we go to the review phase when the impact analysis is finished by the staff. I got the confirmation, let's say unofficial confirmation this afternoon from the staff that is here in the meeting that it will be released today or tomorrow EU time, okay? So that means it will continue the discussion and we will decide then if it reached consensus or not. So that's the status. Of course, I am not presenting the text of the policy because it's exactly the same basically we have here. According to the discussion, maybe some rewording, etc., but I don't think there will be too many changes. APRICOT. I submitted the policy together with other co-authors in APRICOT. This is the proposal number, the title, the link. It was submitted on the 4th of November, version 1. We got some inputs. It reached consensus on December 4. So, wow, I didn't realize it, just 30 days. That was quick. And it's in the last call. In the last call, we got some contradictory inputs. The chairs extended the last call. One of the co-chairs is actually here in the meeting, so I asked him actually to be around. I am not sure, I cannot see him here, if he wants to say something, but basically some people that misunderstood what means routing and RpkI were saying, wow, which these governments will be able to block countries. And we tried to ask them, explain how, and if this is something different than what they can do already today, and they never responded. The co-chairs are thinking, I think the main problem is lack of education about the topic, and I hope it will pass the last call, and just in case, I started an appeal. Okay, so if the last call don't pass because they decide that there are objections, they need to be justified, like in any PDP context, okay? LACNIC, there is another set of co-authors. It was sent also in November. The PDP in LACNIC is a little bit different. It mandates 8 weeks minimum discussion or up to the next meeting if it's more than 8 weeks. So I believe it will be necessary to do a new version because there is a small problem with the language, which is basically that is saying LACNIC may do the ROAS instead of should do, and that should be changed. Obviously, it's a problem of language, nothing else. So I expect a new version soon, and then hopefully we'll reach consensus in the next meeting in Cali. Now, I put some additional comments, and again, this is from my own. According to what I read from the different communities where I am participating is some people were saying, do we need a global policy? I don't think so, because it takes longer, it's more difficult to reach consensus on the same text, etc. What we have right now is what we could call a global coordinated policy, because it's sometimes the same authors or others or combinations of both working on the same text, which is slightly different wording sometimes, but maybe do by the language or use it in the region, like in LACNIC, the default language is the Spanish, etc., etc. But actually it's all the same, right? Of course, there may be additional changes if in some region don't reach consensus and we need to move forward with new versions, but I don't really expect that that's going to happen. By the way, I forgot to mention that according to the impact analysis in RIPE, which I still have not read, but what I was told, there is not any problem, any blocking thing. It's just the impact of putting, of implementing it, like what we heard this morning from George here, right? And this is also something that I got from the inputs from George this morning is I don't think we need to amend the actual proposals to ask the registries to coordinate their timings on the implementations or what they should do, how they will change the certificates or whatever. I think we should try as much as possible that they coordinate by themselves. And this is done actually for many other proposals like transfers, etc. So why not? If that don't work, then we can come back as community and put our own details. But I don't think that's needed, and if we can avoid more policy proposals, it's even better, right? It's, at the end, it's operational issues. Of course, we could do also a global policy to fix that. That's a possibility, but I don't think that's easy, and I don't think it makes sense. Now, I didn't know how to title this slide, so it said more. With these policies in the different regions, the IANA unallocated space is not covered. So I think once we have all the regions on board, it will be interesting to also do one, and this case should be a global policy for IANA to also generate the ROAS for the unallocated IANA space. That will be fantastic if we can reach that. If any of the registries don't get consensus on their own policy, I am not sure if we will be able to do the global policy for that, even though it may happen. It may happen that the regions say, okay, for our unallocated space, we don't want this, but for the IANA space, maybe yes. We'll see. I was wondering if we need any ITF work. I don't think so, but I was thinking also if we cannot reach a global policy for asking IANA to do that, we can do from ITF maybe. So that's an alternative to global policy. And that's it. Again, it's my own views, my own thoughts, nobody consulted. I'm not sure if everybody will agree on that, etc., etc. Thank you. Questions, whatever. Tomatoes.
Sorry, David Woodgate, Telstra. Sorry, did I blink and miss one RIR in that summary?
18 still don't have the proposal.
Right.
We will fix that.
Thank you very much.
Don't worry. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody, for your update. No, you didn't miss Aaron. It's a different topic. We can have a discussion over beer. That would be much better. So that's why it's not there yet. Anyway, so because of the time shortage, I promised you to present the matrix. I will in tomorrow's session when I'll present it in front of the EC and the community. I'll make sure that the slide is there for the matrix, that what we are planning to do for the next 12 months and what we will do in APNIC 4050 and what are our targets and what we are trying to achieve. So that's it for the day. And thank you so much for the support for the inauguration.